Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to bring an interesting question to everyone, and it is about curving out in Star Wars Unlimited. So, I actually looked at the Star Wars deck builder, and I found this deck. It is not mine. It just had a lot of likes on it, and I wanted to look at one of the most played and seemingly strongest decks in the format. So, right here, we have a Boba Green deck. It's very standard. A lot of its choices are standard, maybe some interesting things like mating, strafing, gunship. But I wanted to talk about curving out and is it something that decks want to do in Star Wars? So first, let's talk about what curving out means. It means once you get to two resources, you play a two-costed card. Once you get to three resources, you play a three-costed card. Once you get to four resources, you play a four-resource card, and so on, right? So in Star Wars, do I want to curve out? Because in other games I've played, I usually always want to curve out. I don't want to be playing two drops on four resources. I want to be playing a four resource card. I want to be playing the most powerful card that I can, unless I need to deal with board with multiple cheap cards. Which I think why Boba is good in this regard, right? While it has the option of curving out or doing both. But in general, what does Boba want to be doing? And is curving out generally the best strategy overall? So let's take a look at this deck. So in this deck, if we look at it, right, we're looking at Greedo, Bib, Crafty Smuggler, and Cartel Spacer are all cards we can play turn one. 3, 6, 9, 11 choices. Maybe you could say, Spacer means 8. So there's 8 cards that I want to be playing turn one. Like, we're probably not playing No Good to Me Dead, but we could if we want to tap down their card. But 11 out of 50, that's 1 in 5, and we're seeing 6 cards. So that's actually, that's how I do like the quick maths, right? Not necessarily 100% guaranteed, obviously, but a pretty good chance that you're going to see a card that you want to play turn one. Now let's look at three resources. So there's only two real cards that I can be playing with Super Laser Tech or Boba Fett, but I can also waylay my opponent's card, which does come up a lot on three resources, especially if they play like a wing leader or something to buff it. So yeah, but then so let's just say they're all viable, sure. So that's 9 options, which is about again 1 in 5. So again, probably will have a 3 drop. But then we look at the 4 drop option and we see that there's only three cards that I can play on 4 resources. So it's not that likely that I'm going to be doing this. Though you could say, well, if you drew the super laser tech, you'd be at 5 resources. But if we look at 5 resources, there's 3, 6, 9, 11 cards that I want to be playing on 5 resources, but only 3 on 4. Which shows me when I have 4 resources, what is my deck doing instead? Obviously, Boba's effect lets us untap 1, but doesn't let us gain 1. So then what am I doing? Am I playing 2 cards that cost 2? Well, I do play 11 of them, but I probably played 1 to start the game, so then I need to see 3. And I'm seeing 3 in what? 10 cards? That's a little bit more unlikely. What else could I do? Well, then you could start saying, well, there's a lot more than just 11, Spencer. We have No Good to Me Dead, Surprise Strike, and we can even be playing like the Shoot First. Okay, so now we're looking at like 20 cards. That's a lot, and I only need to see 3 of them and 10 cards. That's a lot more likely. But, is that what Boba wants to do? When I get to 4 resources, do I want to play a 4 costed card? Or do I want to be like surprise strike my Boba from last turn and no good to me dead tap down your card, right? And I think this is like the deck building conundrum that maybe a lot of people fall into when building a deck. And it's an important question. While you might not think I'm saying anything, is when you build a deck, you need to have a deck's game plan, a purpose, but also like a natural flow of the deck and how we're playing it. Because right now, to me, this deck looks like, on 4 resources, it's usually not playing a 4 resource card. It's playing smaller things. If I'm playing 2 smaller cards, then my hand size is going to be very low. If we want to talk about general hand size, right, you start with 4 cards, technically, because you get rid of 2 of them. And each turn, you're going to be playing 1 of them, right? And each turn, you're gaining 1 back. So your natural hand size is 4, but because you're naturally playing a card every turn, your hand size is approximately 3. So any turn that you play 2 cards, you're actually going to go down to 2 cards left in hand. So that's something to think about in general, especially when you evaluate discard effects, right? If my opponent only plays 1 card every turn, then if I get him to discard 1 card, well, their natural hand size after playing a card is still going to be 2. So just keep that in mind. But on 4 resources, it looks like I'm always going to be playing 2 cards. So my natural hand size is going from 3 to 2. Uh, okay, so I'm, at all times after playing a card, going to have 2 cards in my hand, which does not leave much options after playing those 2 cards. And then when I get to 5 resources, it's very likely that I'll have a 5-costed card. So let's say I play a 5-costed card. And then we get to 6, and again, there's only 3 of them. And it's a very, very, very powerful card being Fett's Fire Spray, but it's not very likely that I'm actually going to see it. On 6 resources, you've drawn 2 cards 5 times, and so 16 cards. So 16 out of 50, you know, maybe like a 1 in 3, and right? On average, you'll see a fire spray in 16 cards, but a good amount of time you're not going to see it. So if I've already, on 4 resources played 2 cards, then on 6 resources, I'm either being mana inefficient by playing a 5-costed card, or I'm again playing 2 smaller things. But if you look at this deck, the 2 smaller things you could be playing is like a Boba and a Waylay, and there's only 9 of them. So you can kind of see all these numbers starting to come together, and maybe saying that it's difficult to play 2 cards that cost 3 on 6 resources. Now, we haven't even talked about that Boba has an ability that lets you ready 2 resources when he comes into play. So maybe on your 5 resource turn, your natural hand size is actually going down to 1 because you played an additional card with Boba's effect. Now, if your natural hand size is 1, that's really small. That makes every decision you make a lot harder. That makes when you lose a card to discard, your natural hand size being 0, that's terrible, right? And if we played an extra card on 5 resources and we played 2 cards on 6 resources, we are now in what's known as top deck mode, where, we're playing whatever we get off the top. And is that a space where we want to be? So a lot of these things come into question. And then you're like, hey, Spencer, what about card advantage? Actually, none of these cards draw us cards. If you look at the entire deck, nothing draws cards at all. There's zero ways to draw cards. So when I look at this deck, I see that it's actually a really aggressive in the way that it's using its cards aggressively, and that it doesn't actually want to play the game that late. Because when I get to 7 resources, I only have 2 choices. I've seen 18 cards around, right? And ideally, I've seen the Vader, but I might not have. And if I didn't see Vader, my 7 resource plays suck. Like, I'm being very mana inefficient. I'm probably playing another 5 drop and doing nothing with my 2 resources. If I have another card in hand and 2 resources, that's probably my last card in hand. And this stuff becomes pretty interesting, at least to me, if you guys think about this holistically in a deck building approach, because this deck will have no more cards. As 7 resources, just no more. Like, even if it plays Vader, its effective hand side is probably 1 unless it took a lot of weak turns. So and when you say, like, okay, why does that matter? Well, this is how a control deck does good, because their effective hand size on 7 resources is not going to be 0, 1, 2 cards, right? It's going to be 3 or 4. They've done a lot of value trades. They've drawn extra cards. They've used resources to gain more, and maybe this is how Boba can start losing. And when you see that, on a side note, you can start seeing a deck's weakness. Well, I don't really need to kill them at any point, actually, from 1 to 7 resources. In fact, they can be at 25 life. That does not matter at all, because they're just going to simply run out of strong plays and cards. Anyway, that brings me back to another concept that I don't want to talk about fully in this video. I want to stick to curving out. So is this deck doing the best thing that Boba can do? And I'd say, again, not my list, but I'd say no, because of the idea of it not really curving out effectively. it seems like this deck really, really wants to find a super laser tech so that it can play all these five costed cards. If that's so, I would consider adding resupply to my deck. So then I'm always hitting these five costed plays. And then if I'm always hitting these five costed plays, then I probably want to have always a six drop turn. This deck seems like it always wants to curve out. Instead, it's given itself a bunch of events, which gives it a lot of tools to maneuver in the mid game and to have a lot of versatility, but then it's just going to run out of cards. So, what decks do I want to be having, all of these mid-game tricks and stuff? And I think these are the questions that you want to ask yourself when building a deck. So I'm not here to, I guess, answer all these questions that I'm asking, and there's a lot of them, right? I'm here to really help you guys out when you're building a deck and ask yourselves, what do I want to do on every single turn? Is the idea that I go 2 drop, 3 drop, 4, all the way to Darth Vader 7 drop? I may play a control deck, 8 drop Avenger. Like, this is how I want to do. I want to play 1 card a turn. Or do I want to play 2 cards a turn? And when do I want to play 2 cards a turn? Like, what are the resource costs that I'm saying, hey, I'm going to play 2 cards a turn on this resource cost? Because once you commit to that idea, you realize you can only do it so often. You can only play 2 cards a turn 2 times, really, before you have no more hand. And when you put all these things together, it really helps you make a deck. Instead of just saying, I'm going to put the strongest cards in these colors together, wow, it turns out I have 18 2 drops. That's probably fine. I have Boba. I'm going to be gaining 2 resources back. I should have a lot of 2 drops because I'm gaining 2 resources for free all the time with Boba. While that is true, you're gonna run out of cards. Like, there's nothing here that draws you cards. And yes, that's really the point, guys. So when you build your decks, really think about, does my leader want to curve out? Does my leader want to play multiple cards? What turn does it want to play multiple cards at? How many times can I afford to play multiple cards? And once you put all those things together, you'll really start noticing, hey, I actually don't need 4 costed cards in my deck, right? Like, or hey, like, why do I feel the need to play a 2 drop? Because if I don't play a 2 drop, well, I don't have anything on the field, I actually gain an effective natural hand size for the entire game because you didn't play something for a turn. That allows you to play 2 cards in a turn later on in the game. And these ideas, like, really, really will help you focus when making your deck and competing at the highest level. So I just wanted to talk about that, and I really appreciate you guys checking out my channel. I hope you liked more of this discussion type video, and thank you, sir, for letting me view your deck. In the future, we'll show you guys my Boba list, and we will talk about my choices. But until then, guys, peace.